Now, all debt is not created equal. You can argue that it's better to take on debt to pay for an education or a home than it is to run up debt on a credit card to pay for new clothes or the latest smartphone. And there are some very interesting conclusions about where people are taking on more good debt versus bad debt. One analysis of the Urban Institute's data shows higher income metro areas have more mortgage debt, while non-mortgage debt, including debt in collection, is higher in less affluent blue-collar areas. That's according to Richard Florida. He's the author of The Rise of the Creative Class and the director of the Martin Prosperity Institute at the University of Toronto, and he's a great friend of our show. Richard, great to see you again. Thank you for being with us.
Great to see you, Ali.
You studied this report by the Urban Institute. What are the implications?
Well, first of all, the Urban Institute researchers did a great job. You know, one of the things they say is we've studied income inequality, we've studied wealth inequality, but very few people have studied the differences in debt.
Right.
And they really dug in and looked at this, both overall, you know, that 35% of people have debt in collections, but also across metros. You know, you see this on the map, that giant debt collection belt in the South. But what's really interesting, 26 of the top 100 metros have more than 40% of their people with debt in collection.
Right.
A place like Las Vegas or Jacksonville, Florida, have almost half of their population with debt in collection.
Which correlates, by the way, to places with high foreclosures, places where they got really hit. So your equity that might have been in your home, if you owned one, collapsed.
And what's interesting, there's a real difference between total debt, which includes that good debt to pay for an education, to take on a good mortgage in a growing area that's appreciating, versus bad debt, you know, to pay off a credit card or go on a buying binge or go on a trip. Or tragically have to pay for medical bills or you know, a financial emergency. What we found when we looked at the data and we really subjected it to a kind of statistical analysis is that the good debt, the mortgage debt, the education debt was a characteristic of a high-tech, highly professional, knowledge-based metro. A San Jose, a San Francisco, a Boston, a Washington, D.C. The bad debt was a characteristic, that consumer credit card debt, that going on a spending binge debt, was a characteristic of a place with not a lot of good jobs, an older Rust Belt metro, a Sun Belt metro like we mentioned, Las Vegas or Jacksonville, that got hit by the housing crash. So it's really, once again, a tale of these two Americas, except told not only in who's got rising incomes and rising boats, who's got debt and is faltering and falling behind.
Now, if you are in one of these places where you know, let's look at mortgage debt relative to income. You know, the darker blue areas are where people are carrying much more mortgage debt relative to their income, and as you get lighter, you see, you know, more relief from that. Again, this is one of those things that if you have debt in collections, you're not going to get a mortgage. You're certainly not going to get one at any kind of good rate.
One really intriguing finding that we came up with when we looked at the data, which quite surprised me. I had assumed that the higher your mortgage debt was to income, the worse off your metro, your city would be. But actually, there was a higher debt to income ratio in prosperous places. And I think that's simply because people they have high incomes. They have more disposable income. They can tolerate, you know, they can tolerate a higher mortgage and still have money left over. It was the non-mortgage debt to income that was really, you know, focused, highly correlated with these kind of lagging places.
What do you do about it? What is there? Does this research give you some sense of how you're supposed to address this? Because this stuff holds our economy back. This is the stuff that keeps us bifurcated, right? Because the wealthy, those who are not saddled by debt, buy homes and they buy stocks, the things that make you richer.
And they buy homes in smart places. You know, the global super rich, where are they buying homes? New York City, San Francisco, on the coast of LA, not inside Miami, on the coast in Miami, up in Toronto, Vancouver, London. They're buying real estate that is appreciating at a rapid clip because there's a limit on land supply. But I think, you know, the big story here is that we are a nation addicted to debt. I mean, you know this. You know this better than I do. And, you know, Americans sooner or later have to understand that debt is not a way of living. I think that's the big difference even between Americans and Canadians, you know. The Americans really believe that they can live on a credit card, live on, you know, using their house before as a piggy bank. And I think the lesson of this study is too many of us still think that's, even with the Great Recession, you know, you would have thought this would have cured it. But I think the real thing is that Americans have become, in a way, over-dependent and, you know, addicted to debt.
That's an interesting story. Richard, always a pleasure to see you. Thank you so much. And for those of you out there who have not read the book, The Rise of the Creative Class, among Richard's other books, are definitely worth a read.